Hi, this is Anthony with Kershaw, Cook and Talley. I'm one of the attorneys here. And today I thought we'd talk a little bit about concussions and what exactly is a concussion. First of all, a concussion is what's known as it's a mild traumatic brain injury. So people may have heard of a TBI. There's mild traumatic brain injuries, moderate traumatic brain injuries, and of course serious traumatic brain injuries. But a concussion is actually what's referred to as a traumatic brain injury. It's usually of the mild form, although it can be moderate as well. And thanks to all the litigation that's gone on with the NFL, I think the public has become much more aware of the seriousness of concussions and what happens, especially when young people, young athletes, and others sustain a concussion, playing their sporting activities. So. First of all, one of the misconceptions I thought I would put out there is that it's not just confined and limited to football. I think a lot of us tend to think about concussions now because of, like I said, what's going on in the NFL. But actually the number one cause of concussions in female athletes, in women, young women athletes, is soccer. There's some statistics out there in the NCAA, so college athletics. You would think that perhaps the highest rate of concussions happens in football, but actually the highest rate of concussions happens in women's hockey, and it happens at a rate more than double football in college. So we tend to think of it as a problem perhaps confined to football. I think some others have now seen that it's happening in soccer and some of these other sports, but potentially I think sometimes some of the women's athletics gets left out, and women's soccer and of course women's ice hockey is one of the big causes of concussions as well. So the medical science and the literature has been out now for decades over the seriousness of concussions. And what's the problem with concussions is when you get repeated exposure to a mild traumatic brain injury like that, it can lead to brain disease later on. With the NFL, we've seen now that it can lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, so CTE, which the literature right now shows can affect players in memory loss, aggression, confusion, depression, and the onset of dementia. So some of the other statistics out there that show that pro football players are 8 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's or dementia than the general population. So when you look at something like that, 8 times more likely than the general population, and the link there is obviously the amount of mild traumatic brain injuries that they've taken. Linemen, receive traumatic brain injuries more than any other player in the NFL, and the way that it gets diagnosed is unfortunately in autopsies. But we've known for years now through medical science that concussions are a serious thing and they have to be taken seriously. I think anyone who's my age, in their 40s or older, we grew up, everyone, we've all thought of, you get your bell rung. You get your bell rung, get back in there. Just shake it off. He'll be all right in a minute. Get him back in there. But now we know that's important that we don't do that. And many states, in fact, I think all states except Wyoming, have passed some sort of variation of the when in doubt, sit 'em out law. And California has one of those. There's a couple laws that apply. Interestingly, the one for California it's Education Code Section 49475 is the main one. And interestingly, it doesn't require training. That law doesn't require training for coaches or for a parent to be notified. But there are other parts or provisions of other laws that kind of make that up in other ways. But the significance is, we see a lot of people with injuries, the car accidents, other things where they've sustained a concussion. So the important thing is to remember when you sustain a concussion or you've had a blow to your head, you need to seek treatment. You need to go see your doctor. Make sure you get tests. Sometimes the testing will involve CT scans or MRIs. Sometimes a concussion can be detected on those scans. Sometimes it can't. And in fact, more oftentimes than not, it can't. And in fact, 90% of concussions do not involve a loss of consciousness or a seeing stars effect, according to the literature. So But if you do sustain a concussion, you look at what the Mayo Clinic will tell you that even a mild traumatic brain injury, some of the physical symptoms that you'll see with a concussion could be loss of consciousness for a few seconds to a few minutes. There could be no loss of consciousness, but a state of being dazed, confused, or disoriented, headache, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, drowsiness, difficulty sleeping, sleeping more than usual, dizziness or loss of balance. You could have sensory symptoms, those being blurred vision, ringing in the ears, a bad taste in your mouth, or changes in the ability to smell, a sensitivity to light or sound. So those are your sensory symptoms with a concussion. You could also have cognitive or mental symptoms where your memory or mood can change. You can have concentration problems. You could be feelings of feeling depressed or disoriented. And the thing about is if you sustain a concussion, a lot of times, the treatment's going to be to rest. It's going to be to not do any sort of thinking. Stay off your computer, stay off your cell phone, don't watch TV, don't read. It's really just going to be things that stimulate brain activity, because a concussion is a temporary dysfunction in brain cells. So if you sustain, or you suspect that you sustained a concussion, again, the protocols in place now would have a student athlete needs to come out of the game immediately, and if a concussion is diagnosed, they cannot be put back in for at least 7 days. In fact, if they're taken out of the game for a suspected concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury, they can't go play again for another 7 days until there's written approval from a healthcare practitioner. So the same goes for anyone. If you're in a car accident or anything like that, and you end up getting diagnosed with a concussion, think about that for a second. You're probably not going to be going to work, or shouldn't be going to work, where most of us are using our brains. We're thinking. Every job we do, we're having to think and concentrate and focus. So you're going to be out for a little while. You're going to lose some of the appointments and things that you had to do that week. You need to avoid those types of things and make sure that you take care of yourself, because particularly if you were someone that was an athlete when you were younger and you played these sports, if you played football, you played soccer, you played ice hockey, like I did, you're gonna if you've sustained concussions growing up, if you've had 3 of them in your life, you're much more likely to sustain another concussion, and those things could lead to problems later on in life. So just something I thought I'd throw out there, just kind of educate everyone, make sure everyone understands that it's not just a problem that's confined to men or boys football. It's a problem in women's sports tremendously, soccer, ice hockey in particular. I was actually shocked when I read in the NCAA the number one, the highest rate of concussions, as I said, was in women's ice hockey. So, and of course, I did want to throw one other thing out there. Although the medical literature has known about this for decades, the sports and sporting organizations themselves have been really slow to change. And it was really litigation. It was lawsuits that have been filed by attorneys on behalf of these athletes that really sparked a change. And an interesting quote that I saw was Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw, who won 4 Super Bowls with the Pittsburgh Steelers, in response or in a comment about the NFL's litigation, he said they're forced to care now because it's politically correct to care. Lawsuits make you care. So, if on some of these sporting organizations that knew that was going on with concussions and didn't do a whole lot about it, they're the ones that are now facing potential liability, for that. So if you think you're someone who's a victim of those circumstances, you definitely want to act quickly, because there are things like statute of limitations that could bar your claims if you wait too long. But just thought I'd generally talk a little bit about concussions this morning, and hope it's been helpful.